Illinois had its 200th birthday party. Now, will its roads get fixed? We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state issues, sometimes federal issues, and how they just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register. With me today, as the legislature's home and we're waiting for the new year to start for the Pritzker administration, we'll talk about some of those things. Kent Redfield is back. He is Professor Emeritus of Political Science, University of Illinois Springfield. Welcome back, Kent.
Good to be here.
Also back is Jaclyn Driscoll. She is a reporter with NPR Illinois here in Springfield. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So Illinois had its 200th birthday party. It was in Chicago. It was at a theater at Navy Pier. I think there were less than 3,000 people. It was originally planned for the United Center, where the Blackhawks and the Bulls play, but that didn't quite happen. Jaclyn, what do we think? Did we have a fun party? None of us were there personally, but
was not there, but I did do some reading. It seemed pretty low key from what I read. Didn't kind of measure up to the expectations that it had, as you mentioned, moving from the United Center to Navy Pier, a smaller venue. I believe I read that they had a Gettysburg Address reenactment. The Chicago Symphony was there, and we got to see a picture of our governor-elect and current governor with their wives.
That's right. MK and J.B. Pritzker and Governor Bruce and Diana Rauner all together. They apparently met with veterans at this thing. And I understand that the Governor Rauner, of course, is still governor, even though he lost the election in November. He invited J.B. Pritzker to be at this event, and while they did appear together, at least somewhere for a picture, when they were on stage, they were on there separately. It was a show, Kent, of at least getting along. They said nice things about each other. I think Pritzker said, "Thank you for your service to the state," to the governor, and the governor, while he had told reporters last week that he's scared for the state under all Democratic rule, he was nice on that day.
And we're playing nice. It was obviously a very modest event. I mean, the combination of it being an election year and that a lot of attention was on that, and then there just really was no money to plan and execute 2 years without a budget. It just made it very difficult. And Illinois is, it's a very diverse state, and we celebrate Chicago and we celebrate downstate and the suburbs. We're not so big on kind of Illinois as kind of a coherent entity that we're all proud of. And so I think it was probably and somewhat fitting to the way that Illinois has kind of been on injured reserve for the last couple of years. That a pretty modest event.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I know there was Chicago Blues and as Jaclyn said, the Chicago Symphony. So you had a kind of a wide range of what makes Illinois what it is. And there was someone on our staff at the State Journal-Register, Brendan Moore, who did a story. Some other states spent in $30 million or more, and it might have been more for their big bicentennials, but clearly, Illinois at its Centennial built a new building called the Centennial Building, which is now the Howlett Building on the campus of the near the State House. It's where Secretary of State offices are now. So nothing quite that big in this time of budget restraint and kind of national tumult, but we'll see where it goes.
It was kind of nice, though. After it was a loud year, and it just ended kind of quietly.
well, there we go. In the wake of this, we have seen as the Pritzker transition continues to announce where things will go as his inauguration comes up in January. There was another one of his committees announced. It was the Restoring Illinois Infrastructure Committee. And this one did look more, at least at the top, more Democratic than some of them have very prominent Republicans as well. And I think there are probably some Republicans on this because there are 45 members. But U.S. Basically this would be for a capital plan to build roads, bridges. I think that includes some buildings as well. But Restoring Illinois Infrastructure Committee, the chairs are U.S. Representative Sherry Bustos, who's actually a Springfield native, but her district is in Western Illinois. She's actually recently been named or elected by the Democratic caucus in the House in Congress to be the head of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. That's the committee. So she's in a near the top leadership post under Nancy Pelosi. She will be helping elect Democrats to the House nationwide. her claim to fame is that she is a moderate Democrat who won in a district that went for President Trump. Also, Dan Lipinski, another very conservative Democrat from Chicago. A new U.S. rep who's on the progressive side, Chuy Garcia of Chicago, and State Senator Martin Sandoval, who I think is Cicero or Berwyn, but right near Chicago, and State Senator Jay Hoffman from Southern Illinois, who had that race long ago in '96 where he came really close to being a congressman, but John Shimkus beat him and has been there ever since. Anyway, so in announcing this, J.B. Pritzker was asked about a Capitol bill. He and Governor Rauner, people always talk about the need for a program to build up our roads and bridges. It's interesting, the current Secretary of Transportation, Randy Blankenhorn, who is part of the Rauner administration, was at a kind of a whiteboard seminar put on by the Better Government Association and the SJR in Springfield this last week, and he basically said, we really need to rehab our roads and bridges. He was speaking more openly than perhaps he was able to as part of the Rauner administration before the election. Talked about vehicle registration fees going up. He thought inevitable. Gas tax needs to rise because it hasn't risen in a couple of decades. Kent, what's the situation here, and what do you think might happen with Pritzker coming into office with a Democratic legislature? Can they pass new revenue streams without making everybody upset?
Well, they can do anything they want, given the huge majorities that they have. But this is one item that you can get the manufacturers, the construction people, the companies, and then the trade unions. Everybody's enthusiastic about that. If you've got the kind of revenue source that you need to get a really big capital bill, then we're talking about spreading money all over the state. And so everybody can get behind spending money, and we definitely need economic stimulus. This would provide people working and paying taxes and buying things in stores, and economic stimulus would be a good thing. It's how to pay for it. It is in fact true that we have not raised our license or vehicle registration fees for quite a while.
Or the gas tax.
And they're much lower than the surrounding states. We have a sales tax on gas, which a lot of people don't know.
Right.
We charge a sales tax.
So we tax on the tax.
Yeah, we tax on the tax. If we were to take the sales tax off of gas and replace that money somewhere else, maybe a service tax, and then raise the gas tax, we could increase the motor fuel fund without making a difference at the pump. There's some ways to do this, and there is, this could be a very bipartisan thing to do. Whether it will get caught up in the inevitable partisan wrangling and all of the other things that people want to spend money on, it's hard to say. But I think this is, if you want to look for one big thing to happen in the spring, this potentially could be it.
Yeah, I guess we have to figure out if Republicans, well, they don't have to go along, but every time a tax increase is passed, in the history we have watched, it's certainly easier if both parties are on board. So I guess it really depends if Republicans can be part of this, if it makes it easier to do. So we'll see where that goes. So one revenue stream for various things, and I'm not sure I don't think he's talking about it for infrastructure, but he's certainly talking about it for the needs of the state. J.B. Pritzker has said marijuana should be legalized. Jaclyn, I think this is an issue that you deal with in your reporting. I know Senator Barrickman, who is a Republican from Bloomington, had a seminar in the last week talking at least to some people about how this might happen and how it would look in Illinois. I saw a story in I think one of the Chicago papers about how Michigan, is moving forward with this. So how likely is it that Illinois is going to be one of those pot states?
Well, I spoke with Senator Barrickman last week, as well as Senator Heather Staines, who's crafting her own legislation with Representative Kelly Cassidy.
Both of them Chicago Democrats.
Yes, and they both think that, they all three think that it's coming, and Senator Staines thinks very soon. They think that she would like to see a bill passed by the end of the spring session, and then shameless plug, I'll have an in-depth report coming out about it on the 20th, but she thinks that people may be able to purchase as soon as 2020. So
Okay.
very soon.
Which is interesting because, of course, it took several years, and Lou Lang was the House sponsor. He's a Democrat from Skokie. Pushed for, I think it was at least a few years, medical marijuana in Illinois. It's been a very slow to start, although downtown Springfield has a medical marijuana dispensary. There are places in the state that grow. I think there's one in one of the Springfield suburbs as well, one of the little towns adjacent to the city. So there is already a trade, and the governor, Rauner, has been very slow to approve new medical conditions that allow people to purchase marijuana with their doctor's permission. But Pritzker seems like full steam ahead. We'll see, right?
We've heard that in the campaign trail, definitely. That's a big source of revenue. They believe they're going to generate thousands of dollars. I don't know how much money it will actually generate. I think that a big sticking point when they're looking at passing this legislation is how they're going to tax it. You can't tax it too much or people are going to stay on the black market, but you can't, undertax it or it won't generate the revenue that they're looking for. And the funds, where is it going to go? They don't have, is it going to go to education? I feel like if they really want to move this bill quickly, they're going to have to say where these funds are going. They can't just say general revenue.
Of course, they don't want to make the mistake, Kent, that Dan Walker and Jim Thompson made talking about the state lottery when it came out, or at least Dan Walker, this will all go to education. And then everybody says, well, schools are paid for now. And everybody asks, what happened to the lottery money when they need other money for schools?
No, and there are some there are some differences in the ways that other states have handled it. And some states have, for want of a better word, kind of a craft beer model where you grow it and you package it and you sell it, and it's all one kind of horizontal kind of operation. And then there are states where it looks more like the way we do regular beer, which is the people that make the beer are different than the people that distribute the beer, are different than the way the people that
very structured
sell it.
and a lot of government intervention in what you can and can't do.
So there are some different models out there, right? I think Washington is more of the regular beer, and Colorado is more of the craft beer, and so that will there are different people get advantage by the way that you do that. So there definitely can be bumps in the road in terms of kind of who makes out well or not as well in terms of this.
I will say that Senator Staines does believe that it's going to be rolled out quicker than we saw with the medicinal program because we already have that infrastructure in place.
Right.
Because we already have.
Yeah, I mean, it was very radical, really, radical in a sense that it was creating something out of nothing in Illinois, other than the black market where you could, I'm told, buy marijuana on street corners.
Not us
they had
here.
to, companies had to be formed and facilities and regulations had to be written. And then I know that the place downtown Springfield that is a dispensary, you can't look in it. It looks
Can't
very
take
secure. There's
pictures.
cameras
Oh,
all
yeah.
over the place. A lot of security.
And
It
Illinois typically is not at the forefront. When other,
Right.
we usually come in after people have tried out an idea and worked it through. And so I think that's, but it is obviously gaining momentum, and I think the Michigan is probably, I think, is medical marijuana, and you've got an initiative that's being cut back by the legislature. This should be politically, we should have, once we get the agreements as to exactly what the economic model is going to look like, I think this will go pretty quickly, that we'll get an agreement.
Yeah, Jaclyn, do we know, there's probably a range of what they say can be raised by this. It's like less than $1 billion a year, right?
There was a new report actually that just came out today by a very pro-marijuana group, and I think they said $1 billion could, or $1 million, one of the two, $1 million or $1 billion, I can't remember. The zeros I'm getting mixed
I
up,
assume $1
could
billion,
be
because they were
generated.
talking about hundreds of millions,
Right.
but still, given that the state has, what is it, a 30 to $40 billion budget each year, you're not talking about some panacea in taking care of the state's budget problems.
But certainly not insignificant.
And is law enforcement on board? That's the question, because of driving and impaired driving, and people who worry about that. I know that that's a continuing concern.
Oh, I think there are questions, and I don't know that there's not enthusiasm for it, but it appears that the enforcement is manageable in terms of the experience in other states. Again, we don't have, it's not like alcohol that we've been, however long ago we ended prohibition and stuff. This is all pretty recent, but I think they're more comfortable with it. I don't think they're enthusiastic about anything that might lead to impaired driving and the
Understood.
sorts of things that they have to deal with. They just assume everybody be cold sober all the time.
Always recommended.
Some law enforcement officials that I spoke with were opposed to the legalization of industrial hemp because they saw that as a roadway to
Gateway,
opening
right.
up
And we're doing that
recreation.
for use in,
For rope
we've
and
had
textiles, yeah.
we've had such
Right.
such strong anti-marijuana laws since, I guess, build up over the years in America. So we'll see. Well, let's get into an even more controversial subject. There was a story out this last week, and I saw it, and I think it was the Tribune, but there were some reports about just abortion. We know that one of the reasons that the conservative base in the Republican Party was not happy with Governor Rauner as he signed House Bill 40, which would allow Medicaid recipients and people on state insurance to get abortion, more of them to get abortion basically on demand as opposed to just for life and death reasons. So more women traveled to Illinois for abortions in 2017 than in 2016, like 5,500 versus 4,500. And the total number of these procedures in the state was up slightly in 2017 from 38,300 in 2016 to 39,300 in 2017. Jaclyn, this is just, I don't know if the law changes in Illinois or if with the Democratic legislature tends to be more pro-choice on this issue. We're in the ballpark, and maybe Illinois has less stringent restrictions than other states, so more people are coming here for this.
Yeah, as you mentioned, there's about 1,000 more abortions performed than in 2016. The Midwest is generally more conservative leaning in those areas regarding abortion. Illinois is seen almost as a haven for women who can't get the access in their states. Compared to states surrounding us, Iowa has very restrictive laws regarding abortion, a 20-week limit. They have a 72-hour waiting period that's being challenged, but they also, this year they passed the heartbeat bill to ban abortions as soon as a fetal heartbeat can be heard. So that could be as early as 6 weeks. It's being challenged. Ohio has a similar bill. Missouri, I believe they only have one abortion clinic. Wisconsin only has 3. Illinois has a couple dozen. So we're seen as more of the liberal state in a sea of very conservative states regarding the abortion.
Kent, this has been an issue forever, and it's been the tug of war, but it seems like the pro-choice side has won against the pro-life side in just the way politics has gone in the state in recent decades.
I don't think there's any question that there is a pro-choice majority, and it is reflected. The Lieutenant Governor candidate, Erica Harold, was very strong on an anti-abortion stance, and that was probably not the best position for her to have in terms of all of the increase in the suburban turnout that we had in the last general election. You wouldn't expect, so there probably won't be much change in Illinois law. Nationally, and I mean, we're not talking huge numbers here in Illinois. Overall, the number of abortions have been going down. A lot of that has to do with, both education, birth control. I mean, there are lots of factors there that are making, that have been decreasing the numbers. But, and if we would get a situation where the Supreme Court would overturn Roe versus Wade, you would expect criminalization in some of the states surrounding Illinois. That would not happen in Illinois, and you would have a decrease in other states and an uptick in Illinois.
Right, if they make it again a state
anyone off,
state
but
by state.
I believe House Bill 40 addressed that, correct?
It did.
With
That
if Roe v. Wade
that
were
was
to
the
be
trigger
overturned,
part of the bill, where
Right.
if the Supreme Court would ever undo Roe
Overrule
versus Wade, it would not affect what's going on in Illinois. And
Right.
that was one of the reasons the bill was sold, and the governor said people should, he was a pro-choice Republican, so and he's still in office. Got to remember
He's
that.
still here.
The State Board of Elections last week did put out the final vote totals. This isn't exactly giant new news, but just really quickly I'll go over the percentages in the top statewide races. So J.B. Pritzker, 54.5% to 38.8% for Governor Rauner. The Attorney General's race we mentioned, Kwame Raoul, who will be the new Attorney General, 54.7% to 42.7% for Erica Harold, so it was like a 12-point win. Jesse White, whose age was attacked by Jason Helland, the Grundy County State's Attorney. Jesse White got it's those tumblers, but it must also be the service at the driver services. But it's 68.3% to less than 30%, 29.2.
Wow.
Susana Mendoza now strongly running for mayor of Chicago, but she won her new term as comptroller with almost 60%, 59.9 to 37% over Darlene Sanger. And Mike Frerichs, the 6'8", I'm not just saying he's a tall guy, he uses it in his ad. So it's part of the politics of Mike Frerichs. He won 57.6% over Jim Dodge, 38.3. And in the 13th Congressional District, which is a big nationally watched race for U.S. House, Rodney Davis beat Betsy Dirksen-Londrigan 50.4 to 49.6, so that's less than a point. Kent, the statewide numbers make it look like a real blue wave hit, but as I think you were pointing out as we discussed things before, the cameras clicked on. In Southern Illinois and some of the legislative races, really, it wasn't such a strong thing, and Republicans seem to have still a base in Southern Illinois.
Yeah, the blue wave obviously washed out once it got past the suburbs, and so two districts, the two congressional districts that were in the news, the Londrigan-Davis race, and Boss, I'm blanking on his opponent.
Brendan Kelly, I think.
Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
Those were two districts the Democrats drew thinking that, 10 years ago, saying, these are things areas we should be able to win. In fact, there was a Democratic congressman who chose not to run. The two districts the Democrats picked up in the suburbs were kind of the leftover Republican districts after they crafted a bunch of Democratic-leaning districts and stuff. So it kind of highlights the changes in the political demographics of Illinois. The downstate has become increasingly more Republican, more conservative, and the suburbs are much more competitive, and in this election actually leaning Democratic.
But the Southern Illinois, not only just conservative, but it seems very Trump, Jeannie Ives conservative level is what we're seeing.
Let's talk about Jeannie Ives, because she, of course, is the Wheaton state representative who didn't run for re-election to the House because she ran for governor in the primary. She came within 3 points of upsetting Governor Bruce Rauner in the Republican primary, basically saying we need to be true, strong conservatives fiscally and socially, and thought particularly on issues like abortion and immigration, Governor Rauner had betrayed the conservative base. Well, she recently joined the Illinois Conservative Union, which I guess has been around since the 70s, but it's getting revitalized, and they've put out some, they had a meeting, and apparently she is among people now saying that Tim Schneider, the chairman of the Republican Party, who was basically put in there by Governor Rauner, should step down. Tim Schneider doesn't, I have not heard anything that says that he wants to do that. He also is on the Cook County board, and actually in part of this wave of Democratic strength in the Chicago suburbs, he actually got defeated, so he's no longer going to be on the Cook County board, but he's still chairman of the party. And Jeannie Ives is one who has continued to say the Republican Party will grow again if it is true to its very conservative principles, but then there are people like former Governor Jim Edgar who say if you're not moderate, you're not going to win Illinois. So where do we go with this?
I believe it was in the same Daily Herald article that you were quoted in. She actually was quoted as well, Jeannie Ives, saying that she believes the swearing in of Governor-elect J.B. Pritzker and a Democratic statewide ticket is going to unify the Republican Party more than we've seen in a long time. So that's her predictions, seeing all of the strong power that the Democratic Party has. Here in
Kent, what do you think?
Well, if the Pritzker administration is a disaster, then not being Pritzker and not voting for Democrats, that could be that could be strong in 2022. But it does not appear that if you're going to have to get if Pritzker has a pretty good term or just a decent term, then you're going to have to unify the Republican Party on more than just being anti-Democrat. And when you get to those social issues, that's very, very difficult. And you look at the split between where the Rauner votes were, where the Ives votes are, you really can't win statewide office in Illinois running the kind of campaign that she ran in the Republican primary. And so the Democrats would be more than happy to be on the ballot with Donald Trump 2 years from now, and then if it were Jeannie Ives 4 years from now, they would be, I think, pretty happy right now with those kinds of contests.
I think the election was loud, but when it came down to it, it was all about state finances and who was going to turn the state around financially. And if the Democrats can get a piece or two of legislation that starts to turn things around, I think they're going to be more successful than not.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens, and we'll see how people react if J.B. Pritzker is successful in getting a constitutional amendment through to go to a graduated income tax, and we'll see what the rates end up being, which he hasn't said. He's going to work it out with the legislature. And if the middle class and those striving to be, like he says, are not affected and feel that it's a fair thing, and if the richer people who will pay more don't all leave the state, as we have heard warnings of, then it's good. And if any of that doesn't happen, not so good. I should just say that in the last week, the governor was in Taylorville. I think J.B. Pritzker is going to be in Taylorville this weekend as well to wish well the people there. There was a big tornado that hit there, and there was also elsewhere in Illinois, there were like 26 around the state. And many homes were damaged, no fatalities that we know of, but some people seriously injured. Just not many, but obviously anything is bad, and we wish people in Taylorville a quick and a cleanup and a reaction to this thing. And the state, I know, is trying to help with disaster declaration and things like that. Well, with that, Kent Redfield, Jaclyn Driscoll, thanks for your help. I'm Bernie Schoenburg. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Capitol View.